board members, starting to my left.
Max McCann, citizen representative for St. Petersburg. Hi, everybody.
Barbara Hazelden, citizen representative for Pinellas County.
This is Deborah Fixator, St. Petersburg City Council and PSTA Chair.
Okay. Nobody on,
Zoom, no.
okay. Is there any public comment? No public comment?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. All right, then we'll go into agenda item 3 to approve the June 18th minutes. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, so now we'll talk about the PSTA tentative millage rate for trim. Debbie Leas will walk us through that.
Well, good morning, everyone. And for a couple of you, this will be a repeat, but we had a wonderful discussion at the Finance Committee meeting on this. And so I think it's worth a good repeat here. So today we are talking about the trim notice, and it is required by state statute that we set a maximum millage rate that'll be posted on the trim notices that will be going out. There are 2 additional votes that will be going on in September at each of the public hearings, with the final public hearing being a final vote on the millage rate. So today, it's just the decision as to what to advertise in the trim notice, and we are currently at 0.7342. And staff has made a recommendation that we could reduce that in an incremental basis down to 0.7300. That would save the taxpayers approximately $500,000. However, we do have one-time COVID relief funding that will be going away. So as I look down the road, we also want to be mindful that we won't have the same level of revenues that'll be supplementing the property tax. What I found interesting is both Brad and I have started to have discussions with the various board members, and some have made a recommendation that for the tentative millage rate or the proposed millage rate that would go on the trim notice, that we maintain it at the current rate of 0.7342. We have the opportunity to reduce it as we go forward if the board so desires. So right now at the 0.73, this is the lowest rate since before 2011, so before Brad and I were ever here. So we're kind of taking a look, stepping back. Now, we've been able to take a look at the probability of doing the 0.73 because we've reduced expenses. I'm constantly looking at different ways, the revenues and expense side, to see what we can do before we finalize the budget. One of the interesting things that came out of one of the workshops was to use AI for our mobility reservation agents, the customer service side of it. And in doing so, we would be able to eliminate through attrition 1 position. So I thought that was an innovative way to take a look at it. Commissioner Brian Scott had introduced that whole AI piece to us, and we are moving forward with that. So we are also on a balanced budget be able to do some of these enhanced services that provide premium fares. So we have, as you know, the ferry services for Clearwater continuing, as well as the Cross Bay Ferry. We're also customer service focused in being able to have a way for our riders to make it even easier to ride through online reservations or registrations for discounted fares that will be moving forward. And of course, we have continued free rides for all of our veterans. That went into place, I believe it was 2 years ago. Now, this slide is a way for me to show you how important the property tax revenue is to PSTA. It is our largest revenue source. What I've done is we've extracted out of the budget various items that specifically relate to putting the service on the street. So when we look at it, we have $86 million coming in of property tax revenue. And we have $107 million worth of direct expenses to providing service. This chart tells us property taxes is very important to PSTA. It also shows the importance of our non-property tax revenue. This is an area that the board has really focused on as far as areas like UPass, obviously our passenger fares, finding a way to increase our passenger fares. We had a discussion, there's a lot of other things that go into the non-transportation or the non-property tax. We have interest income, advertising, fare revenue, a variety of, we've got some small grants that go into there, local contributions, etc. So this chart is to say it's important to us, but when we look at it from a taxpayer point of view, the property tax that comes to PSTA is very small from your property tax piece. We're way down here at this end at approximately 3.7%. Just looking at a variety of different property taxes, of course, it depends where you're living. So important to us, less important to the property tax. You can see the biggest piece goes to schools, cities, and of course, the counties. So with this funding, we are able to do quite a bit. We're able to implement the board-approved community-connected bus network, and we've already discussed a lot of what I have on here. Having a balanced budget, whether it be at the 0.73 or maintaining it at the 0.7342. Now, one of the things that came up in their discussions was, what does that mean dollar-wise at the Finance Committee meeting? So if we maintain it at our current millage rate, we'd be at about $3.55 million. That's the property values increasing. That goes to help pay for increased costs in our union contracts, fringe benefits, including health insurance, etc. So those areas make up the majority of our budget. Smaller percentages go into other areas which we're constantly ratcheting down on. If we were to roll back to the 0.73, it would be, as I mentioned earlier, about a $500,000 savings to our taxpayers, and we can still balance the budget. So the discussion today is what should we put forth? What are your recommendations, your ideas, your discussions for the tentative proposed millage rate that will go on the trim notice? And I really would like your input as to whether we maintain it at the current millage rate for the trim notice, or would you entertain going to the 0.7300? And again, we've got 2 more votes on this before it becomes final, in addition to next week's board meeting. So I'm going to open it up for some good discussion.
Okay, any discussion or questions for Debbie?
Yes,
Thank
Commissioner?
you. Can you go back to slide 5, please? Okay, so if we're at the 86 mil at 0.7300, what is the dollar amount at the 0.7342?
It would be another $500,000 on
So
top
just
of
only
that.
the half means that is the total savings, okay. So I don't know what the previous conversation was, and if there's any pushback in letting it remain the same. But what would be your recommendation now that we know we may lose those we will be losing those COVID funds next year? If the residents won't notice the major impact of $500,000, if we left it the same, is there a possibility that we'll have to raise it to make amends for the COVID dollars?
We do see, as we look at the budget and in the preliminary draft budget we presented, we are balanced for next year, and you can see I call it the alligator chart, where the expenses start to exceed the revenues as we go forward. Just looking at CPI, your Consumer Price Index. So in about 2 years' time, in 27, a little bit, 28, we'll be starting to see some deficits creep into us.
And that's because we won't have the COVID dollars,
We
we're
won't
trying
have
to
the
make
COVID
up for that,
funds.
okay.
Which means that we'll either, if we don't have, we have to have a balanced budget, so we'll have to cut services, cut some of the bus services, increase fares or both. If that time. I mean, we're always trying to look for efficiencies where we can find them, but
So Debbie, my question is this, property tax, from the appraiser, what is about 4%, 4.5%?
Yeah, 4.3 exactly for PSTA, yes.
Okay, so that's just a guesstimate. They seem to be, they give us the conservative estimate, like this time of year is when we're putting together budgets. Last year, it ended up being several points higher than that and at the end of the year, so, I mean, it was good news for most cities and municipalities. But I know that everybody this year is trying to toe the line and to reduce, well, at least City of Clearwater, we ask every department to reduce by 10% to try to bring it down. I mean, you know, the governor's talking about doing away with property tax altogether, so everybody's trying to do a little bit better on the budget. I would think that if we brought it to 0.73 mils, that we may be surprised, and we are gonna talk about this a couple more times,
Yes.
but we may be surprised as we get closer to November that it actually will give us a little more money.
Actually, we've already been surprised. The initial indication from the property appraiser was at 2%. When the final came out on the final valuations, it was at the 4.3%. And every year you are absolutely correct, they're very conservative for the initial percentage increases. The one thing that we are seeing, and we've taken a look at in this budget over the last few years, is that even for the bills, or, you know, the trim notices and the bills that go out, the collections haven't been what they used to be. So, you know, that's been an issue, and we've accounted for that in the budget based on history.
Okay.
but
All right.
don't you think that's partly because of the hurricanes? That people aren't living there, they're not paying their tax bill.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, my concern went right after the hurricanes was, oh my gosh, we're gonna really be crazy, you know, with all these damage the hurricane did. But what it did is it forced people out of their homes. They sold the properties for property value, not home value. And the people that are buying it, they took them out of the, you know, they're paying full tax on it. I mean, I actually talked to the property appraiser about this. He goes, no, you're gonna be surprised this year. Of course, you have the factor that people can't pay their taxes, but most of the damaged properties, when they sell, you know, they come out of, you know, and they
Yeah,
come
they
up to
go up.
full value, and he says, we're not gonna really see a drop in property values, which I guess we'll see in November exactly how that panned out, you know, as far as people paying too, so.
right.
I, just my opinion would be, let's see if we could make it, it's 0.73. At least show that we're trying to toe the line, and, you know, if we come out of this and we need to in next year look at the budget again, then we may have to pop it back up, but, I know we've had this discussion before.
We have it every year.
Yeah, and every time I go, you know, it's real easy to drop it, but it's really hard to raise it, so.
Right,
But anyway, that's just my opinion.
right, and to your point, it's like whatever we put in the trim notice, we can't go over, but we can always go under. I think
Right.
you've brought that up in prior years.
Yeah.
So I had another follow-up
Yes,
question
yes,
before
ma'am.
Chair. On slide 3, the AI mobility customer service, I know that was something that was new introduced this year. What's the cost? I see where it's saying it's going to reduce one position, salary and benefits, but is it saving us? Is that a true savings?
It is very small, I would say, within the first year. It's going to cost us approximately $50,000 for all the software and training, et cetera. But the salaries would be decreasing by around $60,000. And then that carries
We're
forward
gonna sort of
as cost
dip our toe into
avoidance.
this, because there is one vacancy now. We're not getting, you know, eliminating any positions. See how this AI thing works. you know, it might work great, and then we can really save some money. The more calls that it takes versus a human, the more savings.
So, what was the recommendation of the finance committee?
We did not have a quorum, so we did not have a recommendation. And, but we had, I have to say, it really was an excellent discussion, just over all the things that you've just said, you know, looking at, you know, the governor's looking at getting rid of property taxes. It'd probably be, you'd have to find $58 billion, you know,
Okay.
to what we're looking at here. And constantly, you know, the properties have increased by the 4.3%. So, again, I'm agnostic to it. I can work with whatever.
We had quite a discussion too about, in the summary that's in the agenda,
Mhm.
it is disclosed in the summary that the rollback rate with staying at the 7.3, it's still a $3 million increase.
Right,
And to do rollback, that would be, take us back to 7.23 instead of 7.3.
so 7.73 is actually more than the rollback rate,
It's 3 million.
yeah,
It's
Well, yeah, a full rollback,
yeah,
is, this is only a partial
yes.
reduction, it's not all the way for a full rollback.
That's
Which-
why I'm bringing it up, is that it's not a,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, at least it's showing that we're thinking about, if we can't budget the full rollback, then we're looking to try to,
Yeah.
you know, be fiscally responsible and, so anyway, any other questions? Do we have?
Sure, thank you, Chair. Given that all we're talking about today is the trim notice, I would be leaning towards keeping the current trim rate in the trim notice just because it gives us the most amount of options going forward. It wouldn't present us from then coming down below that when we set the actual trim rate. But I'm open to suggestion on this. That my preference would be keep the .7342 in the trim notice. Let's go to the full board, let's have the whole discussion about what the trim rate would be. I mean, yeah, what the actual trim rate would be. I just don't see an advantage of taking that off the table at this point when we can have the full discussion with the board. Just my 2 cents.
And your 2 cents matter, quick
Thank you.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we, based on what Commissioner McCann just said, if we left it at the .7342, because we still are going to have additional conversation and we still have the opportunity to take it down. And as Commissioner Albritton says, once you take it down, it's really not easy to take it back up. So for today's purposes, if we, because it looks as though it's an action item for us, if we decide to leave it at the .7342, we can still vote to take it to the,
Yes, there will
okay.
be two, past this current, you know, board meeting next week. If it's voted that it stays at the current millage rate, after the first public hearing, you vote on the proposed millage, which we can continue to work on the .73. And, you know, then you have a vote for the final millage after the second public hearing.
And the reason why I asked that is because we're the planning committee and I would love to have gotten the finance committee's feedback on this, but since they didn't have a quorum this morning, I would love to hear what they would have proposed in regard, so I'm open to either.
Did you have a feeling one way or the other, Brad or Commissioner Hazelton, based on the discussion?
What?
You know, a feeling one way or the other, even a consensus? I don't know that we had it really, we didn't have any major debates, but I don't know that we have a consensus either from the committee.
Which even adds more credence to my comment of leaving it where it is until we can actually have that conversation. Those are my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, I know this, I know that we can always take it down, but you can't take it up without, at least in Clearwater, you gotta send out notices to every taxpayer to send, to
To go back up,
yeah, to raise it, so, I mean, after you send out the trim notice, I mean, the final. So, I won't vote against a motion to keep it at 7342, because I think at the board meeting, we'll have a lively discussion on it. By the way, I will not be here on board meeting, I'll be out of the country next week. But I did email you and told you that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yep.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I hate to see it come to the full board next week as though it's been approved by the planning committee to keep it at 0.7342. Is there any way that this could be just tabled until the board meeting and have a full discussion of the board?
I think
It's a very-
that's what we were saying. It was basically not to vote to take it down, we're not approving it. But because we didn't have any other input from the finance committee, could we just basically table it, just what you said,
Yeah,
until,
okay,
cause I think that would be,
for a full
Yeah.
discussion of the board.
Yeah, I would
That's-
prefer
that's
that
what-
better than
me
to
too.
vote it for it.
I'd rather vote on it, yeah.
Do we have a motion?
we have not had a motion on this yet.
I'll make a motion that we table it to the board meeting for full
Okay.
discussion of the board.
I can second that.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So, what is that, 3-2, 3-1?
And we're tabling this until,
Good.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we have, next on the agenda is informational items, PSA's ridership data and benchmark comparisons. Evan Deal.
Hey, good morning, Planning Committee. My name is Devin Deal, Planning and Data Analyst Manager, and today I'm going to be talking to you about benchmarking. So I have taken data from 25 other peer agencies around the country. They are members of the American Bus Benchmarking Group. Normally, that data is private. However, the National Transit Database publishes information every year that transit agencies submit to the FTA. All of these reports are publicly available. You can look up an agency profile of any transit agency in the country that gets federal funding. So that's where all of this data came from. And so, first of all, with benchmarking, our fare revenue is low. That is not a secret. I think that's been discussion at the board for several months. We know that our fare revenue is low. There are several things that influence that. We have very expansive discount programs here in Pinellas County. We get roughly $3 million from the state of Florida for transportation disadvantage. That isn't factored into our fare revenue. We get funding from our UPass partners that is not factored into our fare revenue. And we don't factor that in because the other agencies don't factor that in the National Transit Database. So we want to compare apples to apples. What is our direct at the point of sale fare box revenue compared to other agencies? We are one of the lower agencies in our peer groups. We are just over 60 cents is our average fare collected every time somebody rides the bus. That doesn't mean they're paying 60 cents, that's the average. Some people pay $0. If you're a UPass holder, some people pay $2.25. But the average per ride is just over 60 cents. What you see here in this graph is all of our peer agencies are in blue. Our Florida peer agencies are in green. There's 3 of them. It's Jacksonville, Orlando, and Hart in Tampa Bay. And then PSTA is in orange. So again, we are in the bottom quarter for the amount of revenue that we collect every time somebody boards the bus. However, our expenses to run our service is also very low compared to our peers. One of the first things we can use to measure is cost per ride. How much does it cost us every single time we provide somebody in Pinellas County a ride? And we are at just over $10. We are a few cents under the group average, kind of middle of the pack. But we also know that every ride isn't the same. Some are longer than others. If you have a longer ride, it's going to be more expensive. And based on our geography here in Pinellas County, we have a lot of intercity travel. A lot of our busiest routes, Route 18 and Route 52, travel from St. Petersburg to Clearwater. And those combined carry about 150,000 riders a month. We have the Sunrunner traveling from downtown St. Petersburg, 10.5 miles over to St. Pete Beach. We have Route 4 traveling the entirety of the city of St. Petersburg north to south. So we have a lot of long routes, and that means we have a lot of long trips. What you see here is our average trip length, and PSTA is about a mile above the group average. Our trips are about a mile longer than our peers. And again, a big reason for that is the geography of our county. We know people are traveling long distances to work. People working on the beach generally don't live on the beach. A lot of people working in Clearwater probably don't live in Clearwater. They're coming from around the county. Same for St. Petersburg. And so we do see longer trips than a lot of our peers. So one way that we can try to normalize this data is how much is PSTA paying for every single mile a passenger travels on our bus? We measure this in what's called passenger miles. If there's 5 passengers on a bus that travels 5 miles, each passenger traveled 5 miles, that's 25 passenger miles. So this is a big part of our federal funding from the FTA and how that's calculated. And we can see that for every mile that PSTA moves a rider, we are in the bottom quarter for cost compared to our peer agencies. We are also well below the group average compared to our other peer agencies. So we are paying just under $2 every mile that our passengers travel. Again, the bottom quarter of our peer agencies. We also look at our cost per revenue mile. For every mile that a bus travels in service, what does it cost PSTA? We are again in the bottom quarter compared to our peers. We are several dollars below the group average, and we see the same trend with cost per revenue hour. For every hour that our buses are on the road, we are also paying less than most of our peers, and we are again well below the group average. But one major point of discussion at the board is how much are we subsidizing every ride, and is that exorbitant? Where do we stack up against other transit agencies? So we look at that too. Even with our longer rides and our lower fare revenue, we are still subsidizing our trips less than our peers. We are at just under $10 on an average net subsidy per ride. And so we have a lower average fare and an average cost per ride, but we are traveling farther. And every mile an hour that we travel typically costs us less than our peers. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Just a comment, you're gonna give this to the board next
Correct.
week. Yeah, this is great because, you know, we get people argue that, PSTA is expensive and they don't, this is a great, shows exactly where we fall with everybody else and we do toe the line. I mean, as far as what we spend, I've always noticed that, we always, spend less than most other agencies, so it's just very helpful. Any other questions?
One thing I wanted to make I think is related to this that we have been doing lately, thank you for that comment, yeah. I mean, what this is trying to show is across the, as Devin, I think, is trying to indicate, there's really no way, I mean, there's no way that PSA is going to make a profit, or, break even. But I think there is a goal, and as he pointed out, we have been, and I know the board has been working on trying to find ways to increase revenues, or increase fare revenues in some way, either get more UPass, and we have gotten more UPass. Yesterday, we had a great little event down at Bayfront Hospital. Orlando Health is a UPass partner now. They had all these nurses and doctors and stuff. But still, and we've added UPass customers. The board had an idea to add more tourist-oriented services that charge a higher fare. But as Devin is showing that first line, it's like personally to me, it's been a real baffling thing. We cannot seem to get the fare box revenue to go up substantially. You remember that at the board meeting was last month? the union came to the board meeting to complain about Pinellas County school kids,
Right.
possibly, which didn't seem to really be, from our complaint data and everything like that, really too big of an issue. But we've been working with the union on that and putting some notices out on the bus for all riders to behave. And in that discussion, we met with the union and had sort of transitioned that into a new initiative that just started on Monday of enforcing the fare, making sure and not just students, everybody pays the fare or shows the driver a proper ID if they're like an employee or a student or whatever. And this is sort of a change in sort of philosophy. You recall goes back to 2018 when tragically a Hart bus driver was murdered on the bus. And at that time, both PSTA and Hart and our unions worked very carefully. We put those driver barriers on the buses, and we instituted a general policy that what we called it was check, challenge, and chill. You should tell the customer that they didn't pay the right fare, but then you should chill out and not worry about it, and don't get into a fight. Right, for safety. And the union was very supportive of that. That was only back in 2018, then we had the pandemic, which there was no fares for a while, and then, all this stuff. As of Monday, that's gone away. And the union is very supportive of this, that they are making, they feel empowered to have everybody pay. They didn't feel empowered. I think it kind of got to a sense that they didn't feel like PSTA was supporting them, that they would, if they called dispatch, the dispatcher would say, let the person ride. Now they're not. Now they're saying you can't ride unless you pay. And at least anecdotally, I rode the bus on Friday. I definitely saw more people paying their full cash than I had been. And okay. And then Greg, our transportation director, said that on Monday there was 2 buses that actually the fare box was full of money. I was like, oh my gosh, Debbie! I ran to Debbie's office. I was like, we're making tons of money.
Tons.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, Devin's gonna tell me that ridership plummeted or something terrible happened. I don't know. But I don't know. I think I'm hopeful that this gets us from that low, gets us a little bit more money in the fare box.
It's funny how people react when they pay. Cause it's usually just the opposite of what you think.
Yeah.
This is kind of not exactly the same, but Ruth Ecker was doing a lot of free concerts, and they put it out there, free concert, come, well, nobody would come. But if they charge 50 cents for people to come, they go, oh, well, okay, we'll pay 50 cents and the place would be packed, Because people think, well, must be some value here for me to pay. It's probably the same thing on a bus. If they're paying, they know they're gonna behave themselves probably more instead of just,
There's
everything's
value to
a
it.
free-for-all. There's a value to it.
Well, I think that's what the union was thinking, that if students had to, pay or, show their ID or whatever, that they would have less problems with them,
Yeah,
which it may be so. But I think the fact that everyone is now, well, hopefully, most people are now showing that proper ID, or they're paying cash into the fare box, or they're tapping their credit card. It'll increase our revenue, and hopefully nobody will get into a fight.
good, excellent.
Chair.
Okay, any other questions?
If you don't
Yes.
mind, Chair. This is a related topic that I've discussed with Brad before, is having drivers log the trips by people who do show an ID. The
Yeah.
vast majority of the time I show an ID, I don't see the driver hit that
Me
button
neither.
to log the trip. I think getting credit for that trip, I know it affects our formula funds, our federal formula funds. I think that's really important.
Well,
Let's,
we are getting credit. The ridership, as you pass through the doorway, you're counted.
okay, by a camera,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Well,
good.
yeah, and so the driver pressing a button is sort of a secondary thing where we're working with them on that because a lot of drivers don't press the button.
Yeah.
And so Devin knows this, the data we get from that is questionable.
Oh, that's good to
So
know.
we're trying to simplify that and make it easier for them so we get better data.
Okay, thank you.
That's good to know.
Yep.
I think we should play music.
Music on the buses?
We did have live bands on the Summerner at some point.
No, I'm not
a
talking
year
about
ago.
that, I'm talking about,
Elevator music.
yeah, elevator music, because I think it's very calming. And, like,
De-escalate.
The grouper,
yeah, I'm not
thing
talking
from the
about rock
airport
and
plays
roll or,
calypso music.
you
I
know.
know the drivers play like beach music on the grouper.
is
It's
that
been
piped
very
in?
popular.
Is
They-
that
they like
piped
it.
in?
What?
Is it piped
Oh, yeah,
in?
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, on the grouper, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that would be
Calming.
calming and keep just order. It's very,
Debbie?
It's funny that you say that, because where I came from at NFTA in Buffalo, I had been out to Minneapolis for a conference and they piped in classical music into
Exactly.
their stations and it kept the children away, the high schoolers away. Because it was like the old folks' music. So we started piping in classical music into our light rail stations and the kids would go right outside.
Yeah, that's
So to your
funny.
point, for those of us who like classical music, it was great and everybody else just left.
Yeah,
it's not
gonna
bad.
attract more
I don't
kids to
think
do
it's a
some
bad
EDM. I don't know. Okay, is there any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other business by committee members bring before the committee?
No other business, but it was a comment made yesterday on our bus ride about the numbers. Is that something that we don't talk about here? The numbers on the inside of the bus? When Jay made the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
recommendation. We were on the bus and I didn't know this, but one of our track hosts was telling us that once you get on the bus, you don't know the bus number, you don't know the route. You see it when you're standing at the bus stop, but once you get inside the bus,
Oh,
you don't know what bus you're on.
that's a good
No,
point.
put a number
Good
on,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, so we talked about it and I was like, oh, we're having planning committee tomorrow. I'll just kind of put it on the record
That's a
that
good
that was a
point.
recommendation from track, so.
I know that's interesting.
That's a good idea.
That way, when you call 911, you can tell what bus
You
you're
know what
on.
bus you're on. So that was one of the recommendations, so it is official.
I don't know which bus I'm on.
I don't know which bus
Well,
I'm
yeah,
on.
there is a number, but it's at the very front, it's by the driver.
Yeah, you
And
can't
so
see
if
it.
you're sitting towards the back, you can't see it, that's
I
what
mean,
she's
if there's
saying.
an accident or
Yeah.
something, it's just nice to.
Or even
That's
to
great.
compliment PSTA board members.
Okay.
They had a great ride on
Yeah.
bus 15.
Yeah, there you go.
Councilman Britton, let him know.
That's
Yes.
right.
So that would be something for the planning committee, so I don't know where that goes, but I thought it was a really good
Thank you for
recommendation.
bringing that up.
Henry about it.
Stencils.
Just write it on there.
Yep.
All right, our next meeting is August the 20th at 10:30 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.